So, welcome everyone. Today we're talking about everyone's least favorite topic, grief and death. And today I am here with my good friend Heidi Harris, and we're going to dive into a little bit more about our personal stories, how we know each other, and hopefully give you guys some resources to make you feel a little less alone in this process. I'm on year 2. Heidi,
I'm year like
1.5.
Almost 1.5. Yeah. And the reason that we wanted to do this is I feel like when we are both experiencing our grief, there's so many amazing resources out there for like understanding your grief. Mm-hmm. But the resources that I felt were lacking is how to support somebody that's going through grief.
Yes.
So the whole reason that we're putting this together is to really help people become better humans. Like, how do you show up for your friends? How do you show up for a loved one? What do you say? What do you not say? Mm-hmm. Like, that's what we want to dive into today. So even though like grief can be a very narrow topic, I wanted to widen that to just be like, how can we be great neighbors, great friends to people?
Yeah. And I'd add on that too, because it's such a dynamic when you're in it of how it feels, what feels good, what feels bad. Should I feel this way? Should I not feel this way? What is normal? And diving into a little bit more of the complexities of there's really not one path.
No.
Every day looks completely different.
And it's just as surprising to us as it is to everybody else.
It's like, how am I going to feel today? Am I going to be able to get out of bed? Am I going to be able to like shower? Or is this just, your world is on a tilt. So, diving into some of those stories. And if you want to start, like, tell us more about, your journey with grief and where it started.
So, it started a few years before the grief hit. I had some separation with my family. I was estranged from my mother. My father and I had a very great business relationship, so we kind of fell back on what was comfortable. So he and I, instead of having a father-daughter relationship, it was very much a professional relationship.
Right.
And without my mother involved. And they were married. And then in December, my father went in for what was supposed to be a routine surgery, ended up having complications. He had a life flight to a different hospital, died twice that night. He remembers dying, which was like incredible. Right. Came back and then fought for about 4 or 5 more months. And then I went to go say my final goodbyes to him. And they told me that he had a couple more weeks or a month to live, and that was on a Monday, and he died on Friday. Yeah. So it all came and hit fast. Right. And for me, like, it was a lot of grief losing my father. It was also a lot of grief losing a professional relationship, because for me, like, when my body is like in complete trauma, where do I go? I go to what's comfortable. Mm-hmm. And to me, it was work. And then he wasn't there at work anymore. Yeah. And then in addition to that, I inherited this relationship with my mother that was estranged, and the complexities that came with that. So it was like a tornado. Yeah. But Angel's story, and when I was originally thinking about this, I was like, Angel has to be on this, because your story is like absolutely bone chilling. Like, it's
and there's people say that too, because it's one of those things where there's no rank to this stuff.
I agree, but
it's different. It's different.
But tell everybody about your 2021 and 2022.
A shit show. No.
Yeah.
No, literally.
It was.
And I think, again, that's where grief comes in all different shapes and forms. And my experience was, I'd say almost the better part of 10 years. My mom and I, very complex relationship. I grew up in an interesting scenario where I was the baby, but also the only. My siblings, my cousins were all 20 years older, and so my parents were older. So growing up, I didn't have, my grandparents. I said goodbye to them by the time I was 8. Aunts, uncles, everybody was kind of gone. And so for my mom, we started seeing a lot of behavioral things happening with her, and it was something that really divided us even more. And later on found out, during the pandemic when 2020 hit, things really, really took a turn. My mom was late 60s. My dad was 85 at the time, so it shows you a bit of that age difference there. And my mom was diagnosed with, among other health-related things going on the mental side of things, diagnosed with frontal lobeal dementia. And so the behavioral component takes shape in a lot of different ways where when I say the grief process is 10 years, it's because, in that stage, you're saying goodbye to this person year after year after year, and they just become someone else. And so when it comes to 2020 and 2021, I could go into a slew of stories about, how those times looked, all the chaos that ensued because of the situation. But my mom had diabetes as well as several other components of her health, including behavioral dementia. And essentially, it was the myriad of things that took her life. And having to make those decisions because it comes down to dignity. It comes down to, is this person living a quality of life?
Yeah.
Would they want to see themselves in this space?
And as somebody that loves them,
you
have to, nothing else matters at that point.
Right. Nothing else matters at that point. And so my mom passed away in November of 2021. And my dad was 87, and it was kind of this wild day. It was Halloween night. I remember, my mom was in the hospital again. She had was diagnosed with schizophrenia at this point, so it only progressed even worse. And Halloween night, she gets sent to the hospital because of one of her diabetic ulcers had become, worse. And the same night, my dad falls and breaks his hip. So if you've ever had an elderly, person fall, it's like, it's not a good thing. So essentially, my mom, she passed away several weeks later, which we thought was going to be a 2-year plus process. She was on palliative care. And my dad just couldn't recover after the rehab process. So he died about 6 weeks later.
Also, broken heart.
Broken heart, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, both of them,
Yeah.
Just pure chaos. And then, during this time, I also was dealing with family estrangement. There's people that don't know how to deal with death, deal with grief. And, I had someone very close to me just disappear from my life without even mentioning anything about, grief or goodbyes. This was her aunt and her godmother. And then about 3 months after that, my best friend took her life. So it was just, it was a period of all different types of grief. And that's something that we're going to go into also is
the different types
the
of
different
grief.
types.
Yeah.
There's the type where you're saying goodbye for so long, the type where you see, my dad, 88 years old, this long, beautiful life, this random of just pure disappearance. And then somebody that you were about to go, plan your vacation with the next week, gone. So, I think you even mentioned also types of grief, there's all types of grief. It's not just death. It's
death, I think, is what everybody thinks of.
Right.
Because it's probably, look, we're not therapists. We're not trained in that. It's the most normal type of grief.
That's what you associate death with.
But a divorce has grief.
Job loss,
a child going to kindergarten, right? Because then it's not your baby anymore. There's grief associated with that. Kids going to college, all of a sudden you're an empty nester. There's grief with that.
Yeah.
There's grief in so many different areas. And that's why breakups are so hard, right? Because everybody's oh, it's a broken heart. Yeah, but it's also grief, right? The reason that we wanted to sit down is because if you are with somebody that is going through a really hard time, it's so much easier not to say anything.
It's easy.
But when love dies,
you
need somebody to come in and love you more than ever.
Yeah.
So we talked about yesterday was this grief pendulum where once you have had this loss, and whether you can say, yes, that's me, or I know somebody that might be going through that, there's two very different sides of grief, in my opinion. When I look back on mine, I think of who showed up, who checked in on me. Because again, I needed that love, right? So because I've gone through this incredible heartache, on the other side of the pendulum, I have deep, loyal love. I have never loved harder. I've never loved purer. I care more than I've ever cared because I know what it's like to lose now.
Yeah.
And like I've had mini grief, like a grandparent or something like this, but I'm talking about like
Full on.
Not sure if you can get out of bed kind of grief. Yeah.
World, your axis that you once existed on was completely disrupted.
Yeah, because grief, it feels like you're on flames and drowning at the same time.
Yeah.
So
that's a good way to put it.
Can you relate?
Yeah.
I thought you could. Oh yeah, that.
I see that.
But there's like this pendulum of like the people that showed up. Like the day after my dad passed, Angel just showed up at my house. I have no idea if you texted my husband. I don't know what happened, but you showed up with your husband. You had a plant, and you're just like, let's sit down and talk. And I was like, I don't want to, but okay.
Right.
Right. But it was the showing up. It was the love. And that's where this loyalty, like I think we've always had this friendship loyalty, but like the roots grew so deeply in that.
Sure, yeah.
And then on the other side of the pendulum is like this intolerance for bullshit.
Yes, that's a great way to put it too. It's just like when you've gone through that, it's an identity shift. And again, going back to the types of grief, it's like any part of your identity that has been lost, like you're having to figure out what that means again, how this, huge void comes into play.
Yep.
And I think in those times too, it's just like you learn when you're in it. And it's hard to say because unless you go through it, you don't want people to go through it. But unless you go through it, it's hard to understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's okay to say, I don't understand.
It's absolutely okay to say.
I'd actually rather somebody say, hey, I've never been through what you're going through right now.
Right.
But I love you and I'm here for you and I'm praying for you. Mm-hmm. Rather than somebody be like, oh, this one time my high school boyfriend broke up with me. Right. That goes into the pendulum of intolerance.
Right.
It's just like, okay, you have no idea what you're talking about. But yeah, so with you, I know that you just went through all of your firsts, right? Celebrating, honoring the day that your mother passed, your father, and then your best friend. Mm-hmm. What was year one like for you?
Every one of those was different. And
different relationships.
Okay. I think no matter how complex my relationship with my mom, I idolized her. I loved that woman. And I know that she loved me as crazy and bizarre as our relationship had been. But I think, more so, I think our bodies know that we're going through something before we allow our heads to.
It's wild.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Because I've always been hyper independent. I mean, that's a part of my upbringing as well as, growing up with older parents. It's just like, I was me. I did my own thing. It was like my mom, my dad, and Angel. Mm-hmm. But I think year one for me, and especially, anticipating, the first was with my mom. I'll be honest, I think in my head, I was like, I got this. I'm good. It's several months later. I got to pick myself up, got to move on, got to make something of myself. I wanted to do nothing but I want to honor them. I want to live in their memory. And so I was doing a lot of like wearing her jewelry or things like that. And honestly, the day hit, and I was a complete and utter, I was in the fetal position, crying, screaming, kicking like
screaming.
I was mad. I was mad. It was like I was like having a temper tantrum because of this, and it's just like this uncontrolled. And I think at that point I realized, I was somebody that like when you grow up in chaos, crying and showing emotions doesn't really work because like you need to get to a safe space and deal with things yourself. And so I think at that moment it was this flood of this release of some of that.
Interesting.
And then for my dad, it was like, oh, I miss him so much, but I'm so amazing, Bob. Yeah, he was just this incredible human, and everyone, he had his faults. He had his faults too. But like, that day came, and like, of course, I was crying, I was sad, but I was going through photos and telling stories with my husband, and I think the oddest part for me with my girlfriend's passing was even after my mom and my dad, I had more of a physical grief experience, whereas with my girlfriend, it was so mental. It was so emotional.
Why do you think it was? Because of her age, maybe?
I think it was because of, when someone takes their life, it's just this immense questioning of like, what could I have done?
Sure.
Could I have helped this? You talked to her
How did you
the
not
week,
know?
days before, had no idea.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, so it was this interesting space of like disappointment. I was frustrated. I was scared. I was worried. How do I not see this in other people? But then also it's like this complexity of like, how could I have helped? And what takes somebody to that point? Where was I? And so, it was very different in each stage of these things. But those days, those first birthdays on your own, first holidays on your own, I mean, these are your people that you call right away.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about, there's a book that I really wanted to read that I wanted to reference, and I go to text her. Or, you type someone else's name. I remember I was typing in the name Jen, and her email pops up first. And it's like those little moments were just like, phew. So I love the description. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's like grief, like it doesn't shrink. Your life just grows bigger around it.
Yep.
And I think that's the best way to describe it, because I also think that about trauma. Like these are traumatic experiences in your life, and it's like you don't just heal it. You don't just stop missing your mom and dad and your best friend. You don't just stop missing these important people in your life, but your life starts to build around it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what was your experience with that? I mean, you had your first.
Yeah, year one was odd because I'm a bit of a control freak. So me and my therapist were working together on a game plan, because she was like, you need to figure out a plan of what you're going to do.
Yeah.
Because if not, you're going to be dreading it leading up to it. You're going to be dreading the whole day. Like you need to take control over the day, or the day's going to take control over you. Yeah. And I was like, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So we, me and my family, I have a husband and 2 little kids, and we did, those Chinese balloons, like you light them on fire and like they float up. Mm-hmm. So the idea was, let's write letters to my dad and float it up to heaven and like thank him and, have like beautiful moments.
Love it.
And so I invited my mom to FaceTime, and she did not want to be a part of it. It was too painful.
Yeah.
Same with my brother. So sorry I don't know why that got me emotional, but
it's okay. That's what, when we're talking about this,
I know it just feels so like lonely.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was the one that was like, you're not going to cry, Angel. You're going to be fine. It just feels really lonely going through it. And the people that were put on this world that were supposed to love you no matter what.
Yeah.
Aren't showing up for you.
Yeah.
But then like friends like you were like, here's a paragraph about like me supporting you for the day. And to me, as hard as trauma and as hard as the grief has been, it has been such a blessing in my life. Because now I know who my people are. Mm-hmm. I know when shit hits the fan, who I can go to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's this saying, I think it was Maya Angelou, that said, when people tell you who they are, believe them. I believe it.
Yeah.
Now I know.
Yeah.
And also it's okay. Like it's okay to have friends that are good time friends. Mm-hmm. It's okay to have friends that are like, I understand your bullshit. Let's go through it together. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I've gotten this gift of categorizing all these amazing people I have in my life and where they fit in my puzzle piece.
Because how you recommunicate and how you show up, it differs to those people too.
Absolutely.
I like how you describe it as a gift. And
It is. Like I as hard as it was, I'm so grateful, because before I was just giving everybody like, that's my ride or die or whatever. Right. And then I was like, oh, I got it.
You're not BFF, you're just BF, or you're B.
Or just B. Yeah. Just Fs.
Yeah, just
that
some Fs.
No. But anyway, so like it was really hard. Like the morning felt very lonely. Sorry. And then after that, one of my friends invited me over to her house. We got together. We had a good time. And it was a good day. And I was so grateful to have it behind me because then all the firsts were gone besides the funeral.
Yeah.
And the funeral first was like not a big deal for me. It was like, oh, cool. Like something that showed up in Time Hop. And I was like, oh, cool. That's great. Yeah. So that was fine for me. But I hope that year 2 is easier. But you said that you've heard opposite.
I've felt opposite. And, I think that goes back to kind of what you said is like with your mom and your brother, like people will experience grief differently.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to be around those people, especially if, they had their own complex relationships with the people that you lost. And I know, even with my sister, it's just like she only wanted to talk negative things about my mom. And I'm like, I'm not there.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I can't do that.
Yeah.
And I think, honestly, I think year 2, I was in complete shock I think I was in this, again, hyper independent mode of like, I got this. I need to pick myself up. I need to go do these things. I need to go work out. I need to do this. And then like, you just don't believe it.
Yeah.
How do these people that were so impactful, how does the people that made up the thread that makes up me just gone?
Yeah.
So, psychologically, your mind has to try and give reasoning to something. And that's where it's just this complex of like, they're just disappeared. They don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
And so year 1 was very much, very raw, but also so very shocking. Because that is when I started to really take a tune of how people showed up and what they did. And I sat back and I was quiet and I was just observing how people responded around me. Year 2 has been harder because as people that are empathetic or people that, carry a lot of this, I love my people and I will be so loyal to a fault. But then you start to see when people show up, you've got to believe them.
Yep.
And I think that is, I will agree with you. It's been the greatest gift that I've been able to see is just people will take and take and take and push and push and push. And sometimes it's okay, no matter who they are and what your relationship is, to say, I'm done.
Yep.
This is my boundary.
Yep.
So as much as I'd like to say like, oh, you're smooth sailing, grief's going to be fine.
You're fine.
Year 2 is great. I haven't had kids yet.
Yeah.
And that is the one thing that like I'm excited for. But at the same time, I'm like terrified because you want your parents to be there. And it's like, I don't know how grief's going to show up when that comes, or grief comes when, other things happen. See, dang it. I thought I wasn't going to
Now I'm getting contagious.
But so needless to say, going back to what we were talking about is like, it's just something that grows around you. And I don't want to let it go. Because what scares me most in the days that I was so, there was a day where I didn't think about my mom and dad for the first time. And it scared the shit out of me. Because I instantly went to, oh my God, will I ever forget them? And that was scary. That was the scarier part for me, was thinking that I'll ever lose grief. Because I don't want to forget them. I don't want to stop talking about them, living in their honor, etc. I want to carry on their legacy. So I think it's interesting where we want to be so, oh, I'm over this. I'm going to put this in this box, file it away into this cabinet. We're good. Grief is gone.
Yeah.
But it's something that will always be here. And so you can either choose to bury it and put these layers on top of it. And that's okay, just different.
But it's not going to go away that way.
It's not going to go away. But do you want it to go away? Trauma? Yeah, you're going to want trauma to go away. The things that I continue to think about throughout this experience and how people treated me, yeah, I'd love to forget about that. But that too is not something you just grow around it. But grief, I think it's another, we're pulling out all the quotes from all these different things that we're seeing, but it's love with nowhere to go. Mm-hmm. And that was one thing that resonated so well for me because you want to share these things with your people. Yeah. And sometimes your relationships with these people weren't the greatest, but you still want them to be there. I think I don't I can't say that year 2 is going to be better. Maybe year 3 is going to be worse. Maybe year 10 is going to really hit you. But I think it just depends on how life fills in around it and how people continue to show up.
Yeah.
And what you learn from it is what makes it a little bit easier.
Well, through your experiences, how did you feel you were the most loved? Like if you are somebody that's trying to support somebody in grief right now, what would you tell them to do? Because I think most people are just like, I don't know what to say. So what tips would you give somebody? Yeah.
I mean, if I was giving something to someone, I mean, and again, I understand that it's an uncomfortable conversation in our society. We somehow think that we're going to skip this aspect of death.
I know.
I don't understand it because it is, and this is what my dad's hospice nurse said that I loved so much, is that the 2 things that we are made for in this world, coming into it and leaving. That is guaranteed.
Yeah.
And so I think it is hard for people when you come up to somebody that just lost and it's just like this awkward moment because they don't know what to say. And I believe people have the best of intentions in those moments.
Absolutely.
So it's very much thoughts and prayers. It's very much thinking of you. And it helps. I mean, yes, pray for me. Yes, pray for my family. Yes, think of me in these moments. But I think what's, was the hardest for me is when somebody that I was maybe acquaintances with or wasn't as close to would be like, how are you? And it's just like, I'm fucking shitty. This doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Like my life, and sorry, I'm swearing, but like, no, it sucks. It sucks. So the how are you question was so hard. And, I think as people started asking me about, there are people that were close to me that are like, how are you really?
Yeah.
How is today? And like, I was comfortable being like, didn't shower for the last 3 days.
Yep.
Watched, 14 episodes of Ted Lasso in my bed and didn't
I remember
leave.
that stage. Yeah.
Yes. And so I think the how are you is the hardest. And, again, with all great intent of people, thoughts and prayers, I'm so sorry for your loss. It's this interesting, we were saying this, it's an interesting thing when people say, sorry for your loss, and you're like, thank you.
Yeah,
So
because etiquette-wise,
Etiquette's so hard.
it's so hard because it feels weird. Because
Yeah.
it's like, I'm praying, or I'm sorry for your loss.
Right.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Like, thank you. But
Well, what
etiquette-wise,
do you
that's what you're
say?
supposed to say.
Right.
So it's just like, it's to me, it's like, thank you for acknowledging it.
Yes.
Because to me,
Yeah.
the people that didn't acknowledge it, like, when you don't know what to say, saying nothing is the worst part.
Oh.
So say something.
I mean, even if it was a heart emoji,
Something.
And I respect that it is hard for people and that it can bring up a lot of different trauma for other people as well. But yeah, I think saying nothing or the other thing was people bringing in their experiences. Oh, well, this happened to me and this happened to me and it's just like, again, everyone is
you're
gonna
drowning it on
experience
fire
it
at the same time.
different.
So it's just like,
So even how somebody responds, everyone's going to experience things different. How they lost somebody is going to be different.
Yeah.
And honestly, I mean, some people might be very comforted with the sorry for your loss, things like that. But I remember the one thing, this girl that I used to work with, I see her out and about. It's maybe, 4 months after my mom and my dad and Jen had passed, and she sees me out with my husband and she comes up to me. Hadn't seen her in years. She's like, I saw your Facebook post. That fucking sucks. And
thank you.
In that moment, like verbatim, that is what she said. And I was like, thank you.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge it sucks.
Yeah.
It sucks. But
Because
now I
that's
understand.
real. It's
is
acknowledging
real.
it. It's real.
Right.
It's empowering you in what
Right.
you're going through.
Exactly.
But
I can also understand that some people would be like, a little offended by that.
Yeah, but I think
it's my
read
personality.
The room. Read the room.
Yeah.
They know with you.
Yeah.
And, I think it's so important, like, even if you don't know what to say, just show up. And, like, again, I don't even know if you communicated with my husband that you were coming to my house that night.
I don't remember.
But you just showed up. And, like, that was huge. And so just showing up, listening to the person. If you are out of state, call them, text them, send them a video message. The thing that meant the most to me was people that brought food. Because
Food. Yes.
food, right? Because you're going through so much trauma that you forget to eat.
Yeah.
And then, like, for me, like, I had little kids and it's just like, I'm calling people to tell them that my dad is dead. I don't have time to, or the bandwidth to like figure out what's for dinner tonight, kiddies.
Yeah.
You know, so like that was huge. The people that showed up and brought food. And you know, if you're like, well, I want to do that. And like, even out of state, like just sending something, just be like, hey, I'm going to send you something.
Yeah.
Do you have any allergies? Right? Just send a quick message like that. Just making sure that everything's good, and then send it. But I had a friend that sent me a text it was a couple weeks after my dad died. Because what happens, as you know, people flood in and thoughts and prayers, and then they're gone because their life continues to move on, as it should.
Understandably. Yeah.
My life is stopped, but their life is moving on, and that took me a couple days to like figure out. But she sent me this text. Having somebody that went to me and like gave me the power of picking between those things, it made me feel really freaking important.
Yeah.
And
because those are like, that is the smallest decision that you even have power in that moment to make.
And the wildest thing is I didn't even take her up on any of those things because I was so dang excited that somebody showed up for me in that way, that like just the message went so far.
Yeah.
And I love the idea of being like, here's your options, which one's best for you.
Yeah.
And that's totally free, right? It just takes time unless you're going to, you know, ship food or whatever.
Right.
But I thought that was really special, and truly just showing up however you can and however you feel comfortable and whatever the relationship supports, right? Because like I wanted to show up for my mom, but she and I hadn't talked in years.
Yeah.
So it was weird to show up, and grief is weird. Grief is not fun. So,
and it can bring out the worst in people too.
Oh, absolutely. So for me, I was like, okay, I need to show up for her. I haven't seen her. What do? I book a flight and I have her pick me up from the airport because I'm like, let's go through the hard stuff first.
Yeah.
Like, let's get through this. Because the thing about healing, and I'm not talking about like just grief, but any kind of healing. Like if you have surgery, it hurts when it's healing. So just like grief, you know, I can put it under this rug and pretend it doesn't exist and categorize it or, you know, make it smaller than it really is. But you have to go through the pain. And it sucks. It sucks. But on the other side, it's so freaking beautiful.
Yeah.
Because then you have this clarity of like, these are my people that showed up for me.
Oh, the clarity.
Yeah, right? And you know who your people are. You know what your relationships can withstand. And again, I've never loved more. Yeah. And I think that as long as I can remember that it's a blessing, because the only thing we can control is ourselves, right? So like, to me, I just have to remember like it's a blessing, and it's brought me so much clarity in a life where I feel like I didn't have it with friendships prior to that.
Yeah. Well, you know, again, it's always, you have two choices. You can let it consume you. You can let it take over you. You can be the victim to it. Or you can take it and do something good with it.
Yep.
And it is all about how your attitude shows up in it. It's how you choose. That is an active choice.
Active choice, yep.
To learn from it, to grow from it. And yeah, I mean, I think the clarity aspect is something super interesting because it's like you go through these dark clouds that consume you. And then slowly you're coming through to the light, and it's just like you see, who are these people? Who have they always been that you're finally starting to believe? And who are you?
Yep.
And how do you take this forward?
That's a great point, is not just the clarity that I got in other relationships, but the clarity I had in the relationship with myself.
Yeah.
Who am I? What do I value?
Right. Oh, the values come true even more.
It's
and
wild.
I think if there is one thing that I learned throughout, you know, and this is kind of my mom's legacy and my dad too, is that they always wanted to help people. I mean, they would, now talk about pouring from an empty cup. Like they were always, you know, volunteering this, doing that, meeting to this, going and doing somebody, you know, elderly person's hair. I think that was a big thing that helped me, was just being like, all right, I'm in this situation. What can I do to go help?
Yeah.
How can I go help others right now? And that it just fills your heart.
Yep.
And it kind of, you know, despite the shitty situation, it feels darn good.
Well, speaking of helping, what resources would you say were the most beneficial to you?
Do you remember that time I called you and I was like, hey, do you want to go scream in the forest?
Yes. I loved it. So our way of healing was going on hikes.
Mm-hmm.
So Angel would come over to my house, and a hike was really nice because we were outside, we were in the fresh air, but we didn't have to do like the eye to eye thing.
Right.
Because you can just like walk and think, and it's like the
think.
stream of consciousness. And it's safe. It's quiet. I'm so glad that we did that.
Oh, yeah.
I think that was really good medicine for us.
Yeah. And then the moment where you're just like, and I remember I did this too, is, another girlfriend was just like, do you want to go scream into the ocean? And I'm like,
yeah.
Kind of. God, yeah, that felt good. So if it wasn't crying, I remember I was just like out there, I'm like, as loud as I can. And I'm like, dang, that felt good.
Yeah.
That felt good. You got to release this stuff. Because again, you talk about like, if you are just putting this down and trying to get away and trying to carry on with your life, it will show up.
Yep.
It will show up. It'll show up in a physical way. And I definitely believe, our bodies are energy. There's meridians of energy all across our bodies. And if you try to just hide these things down, it will show up in physical ways.
Yep.
It'll manifest as, I don't know, illness, disease, stress. I mean, and that's not something you want to carry with you.
Well, and when my dad passed, I felt all of my grief right here in my throat. It was like a hard, like I can't breathe, like a mass when he died of esophageal cancer. So I feel like that was like my body's way of like storing it all in there.
Yeah, very well could
be.
But
you read a lot. You went on these.
Oh, I read. I'm a reader. Screens. I mean, and I'm honestly, I feel like sometimes you can self-help yourself into oblivion. But yeah, I mean, I read a bunch of different books. I tend to read a lot of like spirituality. I mean, I've studied a lot of different avenues of spirituality. So that was something that I was able to lean into. Therapy, I mean, I was lucky where I had, because of the situation and how hard things were with my mom and my sister, I had started therapy 6 years ago. And so she was, in this journey with me where, at one point she's like, I'm leaving to another firm, like, can't really, but I'm just like, you're not leaving me. Yeah. Like, I am following you. You know too much. You're not getting rid of me. So it was following,
trauma bond.
But seriously, she knew every single story. She still knows everything, every single story. So therapy, I mean, as much as it is hard to go, you have virtual options. You can, it is important. You've got to be able to have the release of just getting an unbiased opinion. I also did masterminds. So I had 2 different masterminds, one that was throughout the period that I was going through with the caregiving experience, and then now the one after. And so, I think that's also interesting because you're with this group of people where it's personal and professional, but you can just talk about these experiences and get perspectives. How did you find these groups? I feel like they find me. No. I don't know.
Came to me.
One was one of my best friends had started this. She's a professional executive coach and a life coach. So she started this mastermind throughout the pandemic. And then another, similar experience, one of my girlfriends, she was an executive at Red Hat and left to start a coaching business. And that's, I was just lucky to be, I guess, right place, right time.
Got it.
Masterminds were great. Physical fitness. And you know what? Actually, I'm going to go back. I think one of the smartest things that I did, especially in early grief, is even like having a glass of wine or what, I stopped drinking. And that was, I think, the best thing that I could have done for myself, even if it was, 4 months at the beginning of the year, because I don't know how I would have handled those demons had I had a substance. And so that was something that definitely helped me in that time was I need to release myself of this. I need to just see the pure form of
get in there and do the work. Yeah.
Yes. The other resource that I would say, I said physical fitness. I think I kind of have beef with the wellness industry because we seem to think that you can consume your way out of these things, that, your matcha latte and your lavender bath and your yoga class. And no, it helps. It makes you feel good from an exterior. But like, as you said, you've got to get in there and do the work.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, I had a friend just drop off this journal. And it's on the bottom here.
Oh, yeah. You bought me this.
I bought you this.
Yeah.
It's my favorite grief token. But it's a journal, and it's things that I had not yet processed, but it prompted me to process it. Like, one of them is, how are you going to feel on Christmas morning? I don't know.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, how do you want to feel on Christmas morning?
Yeah.
And then it's actually like, hey, it's Christmas morning. How do you feel?
Yeah.
Right? So it's really empowering to me. I'm making up a term. I call it pre-grief. So for me, like, that's really healthy for me, because like when my dad died twice and then had a few more months with us, like I had that session of pre-grief where I was like, okay, I think this is happening.
Yeah.
Like, we really didn't know he was terminal until 4 days before, but like, I'm pretty sure that this is going to happen. Like, how do I figure things out? And for me, with this book, it helped me prepare for the 1 year, Christmas, how to deal with family members.
Yeah.
What's always going to be special? What things do I not appreciate about the relationship? It helped me really like get it out of my brain so that my heart could heal.
Yeah.
And it's like $20 on Amazon. And I think it's
like
so
that.
magical.
Prompts are big, because I like that what you said. It's the pre-grief. It's how do you, at least start thinking about these things. And you can think about it in one way and it shows up differently.
Yeah.
One thing I would add to the pre-grief scenario, and one of our mutual friends, Emily, she had mentioned this that I loved, was put the dates in the calendar.
Yeah.
Put the dates in the calendar. And, I have, the date that her dad passed. I have, the date that your dad passed. I have, my mom and dad's birthday, their death dates, because I share that with my husband, because I don't want to have to remind him that day. Like, I might be a little off. I might be a little strange. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I was lucky to have a really great work environment where, they were very much about, hey, we're humans. We're having this experience.
Yeah.
And I remember it was hard, but I told them, I was like, listen, there's these 2 dates that are coming up. I have no idea how they're going to be or how I'm going to be.
Yeah.
And I remember my executive director was like, hey, keep it cool today. Don't take a meeting if you don't want to take the meeting. Just do what you got to do.
But I would much rather have somebody be like, hey, this is coming up for me and it's going to be hard for me and I really don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Rather than somebody not say anything at all.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if it's you and your own grief, don't
Yeah.
be afraid to reach out and be like, hey, these are the things that I need to take care of myself, and also protect yourself a little bit.
And if you're around a friend that has gone through grief in some way and they continue to bring it up, like, let them acknowledge it. Let them have that. I think that is something where people just tend to think it's negative. Oh gosh, she's so negative. She's still talking about her dead mom. And it's just like, yeah, well, if it's your friend, they're still going through something.
Yeah.
So give them that space.
Absolutely.
Hold space safe. Hold safe space for people.
Yeah.
That is extremely valuable.
So what I did is I knew I needed a therapist because I had like all these different dimensions of everything that was going on. And I have this friend who is also a Reiki healer. And I had heard of Reiki. I didn't really understand what it was, but she did I think it's called a session on me. And it was wild because like immediately through the session, all I heard was love, 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 love. And I was like, okay, this is weird. And this is 2 months before my dad died. Okay. So like, it's this weird, like, is he going to live? Is he going to die? Like, what's really going to happen here situation? And I was still not speaking to my mother. And so I kept on hearing that and I was like, okay, sure. And then what came through to her was an old fashioned key, like from the 1700s, like the big iron keys.
Yeah.
And she's like, I have no idea what this key means. And I was like, I have no idea why it keeps, like, love keeps coming to me.
Yeah.
So anyway, as time went on, now what I'm currently going through is I have to prepare to sell my parents' house. Well, the house is built in 1765. The key to get into my parents' house is this iron key that she had during this Reiki session.
That reconnected.
And I have to keep on reminding myself, love, love, love,
Yeah.
love, love,
Yeah.
through all of this. So to me, I was just like, that is wild.
Right.
And I can't explain it. It's not up for me to explain. But then I decided, I don't want just a therapist. I want a healer. So I went to somebody that I could talk to about my energy. I could talk to you about family dynamics. My mother isn't just medically unhealthy. She's also mentally unhealthy. So it comes with a lot of different waves of issues.
Complexities.
Yeah. And I knew I needed somebody, and my healer has been so instrumental. But like, if you are going through grief, or you have a friend that's going through grief, a way to show up is also just like, hey, I've got this friend that lost somebody, and they found this person.
Yeah.
Don't know if this helps you.
Right.
Don't know if this is for you, but this could be a good person.
And that's just it. Let the person make that decision if it is for them or not, because you never know what could work for you in those moments. And I think just having the access and understanding of different modalities. I mean, I even went into something called a theta pod.
Is that the water thing?
No, it's like this machine that spins you while you're listening to EMDR. I hope I'm saying the right word, but it's like this like LED lights, and it's like going to the beats of binaural beats. And so it's like this really interesting, tranquil experience where you're spinning while this is happening. And it's like, you're having these flashes of childhood, flashes of this person, flashes of this person. And it's like 30 minutes you're in this thing. Like, don't sit up because you kind of get nauseous. But it is, again, it's just, there's different modalities that are out there. The Theta Pod is something that they recommend for people with PTSD.
Okay.
Again.
Theta Pod.
There's these things available.
THETA.
Correct.
POD.
And the aspect of it is the idea that in theta, that's when we're little kids, where we don't have all these life experiences to traumatize us and to, turn us into these different people. So you're just in this like playful little world. And it takes you back to that. It tries to kind of recalibrate you a little bit. So it's an interesting experience there. And, again, it's whatever works for you. I think for me in the process, and I've talked to you some about this, where I grew up in a very Polish Catholic household. And after I graduated, after 12 years of Catholic private school, I'm like, I'm done. I'm out of this. Like, I spent the next 10 plus years exploring, Buddhism, yogi, like, different aspects of spirituality. And, honestly, I will say, like, as much as I've tried to explore, like, what avenue, of my beliefs, I never stopped praying to God ever since I was a young kid. And I think this experience is also, and again, this is not for everybody, but it brought me back to this understanding, like, if I just take the lens of these things off and this organized religion off, reading the Bible was something that was extremely helpful to me, because it was the one thing that had all the answers. It's the one thing that, at least just my conversations to a higher being, whatever that being may be.
Exactly.
Comforted me.
Yep.
Because I could just say, all right, I'm giving this to him. I'm giving them to, and maybe that's, maybe you read the Bible, maybe you read the Torah, like whatever, Quran, like,
but have something.
Whatever. Has something.
It pulls the intensity off.
It absolutely
it makes
does.
You realize, okay, wait, maybe I'm not in charge here.
Right. Well, your brain
maybe it's not all about me.
And your brain can't process these things.
Yeah.
To literally think of somebody just not existing anymore, that's I think you mentioned the full human experience. Like,
it's the full human experience.
It's very, and I don't push that on anybody. Like, I offer that as that's something that could work for you. I've read a lot of different books. I mean, this one on top here, that really helped me think of the idea of, like, what is being? Being can be any different form.
What is this book?
Master Eckhart, To Whom God Hid Nothing.
Okay.
And so it has a lot of those answers. He's a 1400s German monk. And so he goes through all these different stories and answers to things of, like, why do bad things happen to good people? And what I loved about some of these readings and even like the 4 agreements is that they don't say, like, it's God, it's Jesus, it's whatever. It's just, it's a being. It's something higher than yourself. And if there's one thing that really, really, I think, got me through some of the darkest days, it was just knowing that I had something else to lean on.
Absolutely, because then it makes you remember I am small. It's just one little thing in this huge world.
This little speck.
Yeah.
So it's like we've got a lot of different resources, recommendations, and
we'll put
people
them in
could read them all.
Yeah, we'll list all the resources that have helped us.
Some people could absolutely hate them too.
That's fine.
Yeah. Because there's one that I was really frustrated by that I learned later on, was like, someone was like, I went to a therapist who specialized in PTSD and grief. And she's like, well, here are the stages of grief. I'm like, no, honey.
Nope.
No.
They like this today.
I was like, you cannot begin to tell me that it's like, okay, day one, day two, like quarter one, quarter two, sadness, anger. I'm like, girl, I have these all in one day. Like, this is not, you can't. And then the other book that I actually passed on to a friend who's going through grief right now is It's Okay to Not Be Okay. And I wish, I'm going to put this in the link as well. Author is Megan. I'm sorry, Megan. Like, she's a great author. I just cannot think of her name. You're great. But that book was a lot of debunking the aspect of, like, there's no stages. Everything is a wild west out there.
Yep.
Days are going to be good. Days are going to be bad. Show up for other people, but show up for yourself first.
Yeah. Well, and what along the way do you think was the least helpful? Because we've talked about, like, if you are supporting somebody in grief, these are the things that you need to know in order to help them. But also, I think it's really important to talk about what is not helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where, for me at least, it came into the aspect of setting very strict boundaries with relatives. Okay. And, for me, it was like, I understand that you have a different experience, but yeah, I mean, bad-mouthing the person or bringing up other traumas or rehashing those things, that's not helpful. So if you can't say anything, then don't say it at all.
Yeah.
I think that...
Send a pizza, though.
Send a pizza. Disappearing.
Yeah.
Not a great way to show up for somebody that you claim to love. So yeah, I mean, I think those are pretty significant aspects of it.
Yeah.
As well as, I think there's other things where sometimes when you want, it's like somebody will want to bring it up when you're not ready for it. And it's like, you never know how, your day could be going fine. And then someone's like, remember when your, person did this? Or do you remember when this happened? And it's just like, no, but I do now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But also, you don't want them to forget it, right? Like,
no,
if we never mentioned again your mom, dad, or Jen, you'd be heartbroken, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a weird...
Talk about them all the time.
It's a weird...
Right. And maybe there gets
situation.
to be that time, too, is like, again, the complexities of someone's relationship where you get to the point where you're like, all right, I'm ready to kind of hash out what this complex relationship that I had and the trauma that I experienced. But I think there's also a period where you got to respect the fact that, regardless of your experience, someone's life ended.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I feel like those are really big things to do wrong. So I think if you're coming at with, here's pizza, just show up.
Just show up.
Show up.
To me, the thing that got me the most when I was going through, like, my early stages, like I'm talking about like the first month, was people that made the grief about them.
Oh, yeah.
And not about
the
me.
Comparisons.
Well, it was more like, I've been really busy. Sorry I haven't reached out. I've been really busy. My world just stopped.
Don't care. Yeah.
Like you just took the beauty of that conversation and made it all about you, which took the beauty away and made it painful.
Yeah.
Or the people that are comparing, and they're like, well, one time my gerbil died. And it was like, oh my gosh. So it's just the things that I would not to say to somebody in grief is, don't make it about you. Show up. Send pizza.
Yeah. Pizza's always great. Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think this goes to the people that are trying to show up for the people. It's like, it's hard. And I guess for me, I gave a little bit more grace to some that didn't reach out because I'm thinking, like, sometimes it triggers people. Sometimes death can trigger something in someone else. And so if they didn't show up, I at least just want to know, like, why? Why? Yeah. If you were scared too, okay, just tell me you're scared.
Yeah, be honest.
Be honest.
Yeah.
But you kind of walk around like this monster when you're like, I'm this big pile of grief. Like,
well, and people don't want to be around that.
No.
Right? Like, it's safer for them not to be around that. And humans by nature, we want to avoid suffering.
Of course.
So it's not fun being like, your best friend just killed herself. Let's hang out, right? Like, that's not comfortable.
Yeah.
But also, real friendship isn't that.
That's another thing that I'm going to bring up too, because I noticed that I actually had a scenario with a boss that I think there's also this societal kind of thing that happens when we use terms that are very triggering without the intent of knowing, where, someone was like complaining about their job, and the president of this company was just like, if I have to do blah, 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 or talk to this person again, I'm going to kill myself. And it's just like, can you not? Like, that's not cool. Or when you start to say, like, oh, this person, like, she's got dementia, like, like, forget about her or whatever. And it's just like, that's a human being.
Yeah.
So I think there's also, like,
That's
these terms that we use still in our world that are just, I don't know. It's hard to just tell people, like, understand empathy, because not everyone will grasp it until you grasp it. Well, I didn't think that was going to hit me until in that moment I had to go off my Zoom camera and have a meltdown, because I'm like, don't joke around about that.
Yeah.
Because people are suffering out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I also think it's okay that if you have a slip up, say that this person was like, I'm going to go kill myself, right? And like it hits you, to be like, Angel, I am so sorry. Like, that just came out of my mouth. Like,
yeah.
But also, like, what a way to build trust back by taking ownership. Like, I said that and I should not have.
Right.
And I am very sorry for saying that.
Right.
That's okay, too. You don't have to be like, oh, my gosh, I said that. I'm so embarrassed. Like, let me go hide my head.
Or, like, talk to somebody else about it. Like,
deal with the...
Yeah, because the unconscious bias. Like, we have these things in our head and we're conditioned in some way by, our environment. So it's like, it pops up. It's fine, but acknowledge it. Because I think we can all be a little bit more empathetic to other people. And
we're all going through some stage of crazy.
Yeah.
And with the awful grief also comes beautiful things, right? That's just how life goes.
Oh.
The one thing that I will also add to the things not to say somebody who's grieving is the know-it-all. Like, don't be the person that tells the person grieving how to feel.
Oh, yeah.
You're in shock. Mm-hmm. You're not thinking about that. Like the criticism, or like that's the anger cycle. And it's like, that is such a boundary to me.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell me how I feel when you also haven't like been checking in on me. Mm-hmm. And like, but like me and you, like, you could have been like, oh, I wonder if that is the anger. Right.
Yeah.
But like,
well, it's a way to shape it. And I learned that in my coaching program, where it's like, it's other person listening first. Mm-hmm. So listen to what show up for this person, understand what's going on, but then be reflective. So if they offer something, then reflect back on that. Don't assign how somebody feels.
Yeah.
You cannot do that, because that's not helpful. And it sounds like it can belittle somebody at the same time.
Could not imagine more.
Yeah.
I could not agree more.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of different topics, and hopefully this was something that was helpful for people listening.
Yeah.
We're going to put as many of the recommendations as we've covered today into the description of this post. And I think I'll say for both of us, like, if you have questions, if you want to talk about something, if you can relate to something, if you want to share your story, we're a pretty open book.
Yeah.
So would love to hear from you. And, I think the biggest thing is just knowing that you are seen, and everything you're going through matters. It's validated, no matter how ugly and messy it can be. You're a human, and we're going through a very complicated process. But
the process doesn't just end.
No. Sorry.
It's not like, oh, okay, the funeral's over, back to life.
Right. In fact, it can even get messier after that.
We call it the tsunami of bullshit.
The tsunami of bullshit.
Angel and I call it.
Yeah.
So continue, if you're one of those friends out there, or a spouse, like being a spouse of somebody who's grieving is
tough.
Not fun.
Not easy.
But just like continuing to show up, continuing to mention the people by name.
Yeah.
I love your idea about putting it in the calendar.
Yeah, that was a good one.
That's a great tip for everybody, because like you see stuff on Facebook, it's like, so and so passed away today. You just put it in your calendar then, and then next year you can check in on your friend. Like,
my husband knew, like, June 3rd, hey, thinking about you and your mom today. Yeah. Hey, it's Mother's Day. If you can't, do this, like, go home and yeah, it's huge.
Good.
But.
Good. Well, thanks for joining me on this.
I love this. I hope this was helpful. I hope that we can touch some people in many different ways. And we're still new at this, so we've got a long road ahead.
Yay.
Yay. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.